these virtual events that are happening as a replacement to the in-person events really aren't generating the ROI that marketers want, especially when they cost 10, 15, $20,000 plus for a sponsorship. So gifting's been a nice kind of sweet spot and fits into the bigger picture of how to allow them to still get their job done in an effective way.
Hey there, I'm Bernie Borges, Chief Customer Officer at Vengresso, the leader in digital sales transformation. I'm also the host of this show, the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. On this podcast, I showcase B2B marketers in the trenches, showcasing strategies and tactics that are working for them in their modern marketing journey. Be sure to listen to the end of each conversation for my summary and takeaway, as well as the closing message. And now, here's this week's Modern Marketer. This episode is brought to you by Postal.io, a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Learn how you can integrate direct mail and gifting into your existing strategy by visiting Postal.io. Welcome to episode 284. My guest on this episode is Nick Grant, head of marketing at Postal.io. Nick, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thanks, Bernie. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here because we're going to talk about a topic, Nick, that I don't think in 280 plus episodes we have discussed. I can't say that very often in 280 plus episodes, but I'm saying it on this one. But before we get to it, I want to give my listener just a brief background on your company. I love the name, Postal.io. I can't even pronounce it correctly. I'm going to do a do-over on that. Postal.io. Tell us about the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So Postal is an offline sales and marketing engagement platform that uses gifting and direct mail to generate leads, increase sales, and improve customer retention. Really doing something that's been done for many years, but doing it in a modern, new school way with automation and integration into platforms like HubSpot, Salesforce, SalesLoft, and Outreach.
Okay, so you're integrated into many of the popular sales and marketing platforms. HubSpot, Outreach. What was the other one?
SalesLoft and Salesforce.
Okay, two of the big sales platforms with the word sales in their name. Awesome. Cool. Well, you kind of already tipped our hand here, and that is gifting. We are here to talk about gifting. And as you and I were discussing in what I like to call the digital green room, doesn't that sound cool? Like, like there's a real green room, right? Well, in the physical stage setting, there is. In the digital world, it's just before we press the record button. And we were talking about the fact that gift marketing has been around for quite a while. In fact, decades. But Nick, here we are talking about it on the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. So why don't you kind of set the stage? Why is modern gift marketing even a thing right now?
I think that in particular, 2020 is a really interesting year. We've had pretty much almost every marketing centric and sales centric in person event become canceled and no longer a viable option to attend and generate leads. You can't press those palms and make those personal connections. So marketers are really looking for alternative ways to continue to grow their demand gen efforts and ensure that they can continue to drive those quality leads into their sales funnel.
Mm-hmm.
And because of those reasons, we see that marketing teams are starting to shift and focus some of those budgets that were previously allocated for these big in-person events and shift them towards gifting. Heard a lot of feedback that, these virtual events that are happening as a replacement to the in-person events really aren't generating the ROI that marketers want, especially when they cost 10, 15, $20,000 plus for a sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
So gifting's been a nice kind of sweet spot and fits into the bigger picture of how to allow them to still get their job done in an effective way in 2020.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Changing times. Obviously, 2020, everything has changed in 2020 for all the reasons that we already know. We don't need to state what those reasons are. Um, So, what are you seeing then, since your company's in the business of gifting? What are you seeing as it relates to how companies across industries are using gifting. Does it vary from industry to industry? Are you seeing, some more than others?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, and there are definitely specific use cases in certain industries that are used more often, but across almost any industry, one thing that we've seen be pretty universal is sharing knowledge by sending books, right? Like a book is something that supports either the content that your business is passionate about and writing about, or it can often be content that your prospect will find particularly relevant for their business. So it's a great way to kind of build a rapport and share that knowledge. Like, for example, with us, we often use a book called Giftology, the art and science of using gifts to cut through the noise, increase referrals and strengthen retention, kind of a long name there. But
Yeah.
it's very targeted, right? It helps to educate our clients because they're often trying to learn how to best use this as part of their process. And so it really educates them on how to effectively use gifting in their marketing and sales process.
Okay.
But, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so you're saying books are something you see used a lot, and how do companies use a book and then get their branding into it?
Well, sometimes brands might have their own book, but it's it's that particular type of gifting is a little bit trickier to probably include your brand in. So it's usually trying to use, kind of big thought leaders in the industry. Like we've seen agencies rely on books like This Is Marketing by Seth Godin, or maybe
Hmm.
using like the sales engagement book from the guys over at Outreach, um, just to show them, they're kind of a expert in the space, and they're providing these really, curated, hand-picked resources that kind of, are thoughtful and meant to be helpful at the end of the day.
Okay. What about the personalization aspect? Again, gifting's been around for a long time, and I know personalization is certainly an element of that, right? So, how are you seeing the personalization factor integrated into this modern gifting world that you're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's something, marketers are always striving to do in the best way possible, but also, try to automate it. And definitely it's still a little bit of a challenge to do it perfectly, like automated and at scale if you want to have very targeted personalization. But I'd say companies in the SaaS space are probably the most progressive with doing this just because they're
Really?
very, yeah, just I think that they're just more, savvy. They're a little bit more comfortable with the tools and technology, and also they often have a lot of competition in their various niches,
Mm,
so they're really trying to, you know do everything they can to really be unique, rise above the noise, and really stand out when they're trying to kind of make top of funnel traction with some key prospects. Um, so often it's where we see things like swag come into play. But of course, like I was saying earlier, with that personalization, you still have to do a little bit of research on the prospect and try to find out some things about maybe their background, or things they're passionate about, perhaps like where they went to college, or a sports team that they support, or maybe they're all over Instagram with their dog or their cat or their turtle, who knows,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
um, so with that in mind, you could then hone in and be like, oh, maybe I'm going to send them a Yeti mug with their alma mater on it, or maybe a hat from their favorite sports team. Or like I said, if they're a big animal lover, you might send them something like a box of cat toys, just to really, again, stand out amongst the competition with a unique and personal gift, and probably not something that anybody else is going to send them. Um, but we also have things like a really cool partner, Nom's Bake Shop, where they have a really nice wooden box of a few different sizes that can actually be personalized and kind of, I can't remember if it's like wood burned or engraved, but you could actually put the name of the recipient and their logo on the cover of the box. And that's just something that I think people really love, and it stands out. And it's probably one of those things that I've seen often get shared in social media. So you get that little extra boost when
mhm.
somebody is like really pumped and putting it on their LinkedIn and just calling out, like, wow, look how cool this is. This came so quick and was personalized and targeted towards me. So I found that to be really
So,
neat.
so one thing I want to be clear on, Nick, and that is when we say personalized. So, like, if you were to send me something, it would be personalized to me in two ways. I think what I'm hearing you say is two ways. One is by name, so it's to Bernie, and in something that you, through your homework, your research, you discovered is an interest of mine, a hobby of mine, whatever the case may be. It's personalized to me at that level as well. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think that's an ideal best practice. Sometimes certain individuals are going to be a little bit harder than others to do that research on to find something, as targeted, as personal. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
But yeah, in an ideal world, that's kind of I think a best practice that we've seen really work well.
Okay. All right. You mentioned the SaaS industry. Are you seeing anything else in other industries that's either unique or clever, creative, just anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, I thought it was really cool to see some industries that maybe aren't on the radar of a lot of SaaS companies like ourselves. Industries like commercial real estate or finance, like doing money management for high net worth individuals. These types of niches have used gifting, used direct mail for a long time. They just have been doing it in a really manual, old school way. And so now that they can have a more, modern, new school way to have this process be automated, it's been a really great fit for them. And in particular, those types of industries are often rolling out like new services, something where they need to like find a way to market to their existing clients to get them interested in maybe, coming and have a meeting, coming and learning more about some of these new offerings. So we've often seen them be pretty heavy in terms of like using food related items as a way to kind of like break bread, I guess, for lack of a better term.
I like that.
Um, and get them in the funnel and get them engaged. So things like sending chocolates or maybe like a fruit basket with some information for them to review, which I think just makes the recipient a lot more receptive to learn about these new offerings and hopefully want to inquire and further that conversation.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier that you're integrated into HubSpot, Salesforce, SalesLoft, and I think you mentioned Outreach. So
Correct.
maybe you can give a quick little comment on like how does that integration, how does a marketer then track? So use me as an example. I'm Bernie. I'm in a company's database. Someone sends me a gift. How's that tracked in HubSpot, Salesforce Outreach, etc.?
Yeah, so the activities in Postal can be part of a workflow or a sequence or a cadence. I know everybody has their own terminology. So really that's, kind of the first step. And then making sure that that data, when it happens is kind of reported and synced back, right? So we have um, like gift emails that will go out. So you're able to see that activity record that like the gift email was received or the gift email was denied, so that you can have some metrics to kind of review and analyze and determine, did this work? Did this not work? Is there something I need to do better? And we're continually trying to like uh, further build out and make that reporting more robust. But right now it's pretty straightforward like that. You're just able to, like I said, put it in that workflow sequence cadence and get that kind of ongoing feedback about when they accept, when gifts get delivered, so that you can if you're trying to get very sophisticated, you could actually use something we have called triggers and actually trigger other events to happen. So maybe when you see that the gift actually gets delivered, you could then maybe have an email or that can populate an outreach. Hey, this is now the time to give them a call because the gift was just received, right? So you can make that seem much more tailored and sequenced to that individual.
We'll be back in just a moment with the rest of my conversation with Nick Grant. This episode is brought to you by Postal.io, a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention. Postal allows you to automate and personalize your offline outreach to both existing customers and new prospects at scale. Learn how you can easily integrate direct mail, gifts, charitable donations, and even alcohol into your existing sales, marketing, and retention strategies. Visit postal.io today and request a demo so you can boost your pipeline and close more deals. So, a couple more examples I'm interested in sharing with the listener. And I'm thinking of webinars and virtual events and that sort of thing. And so, what are you seeing as it relates to, again, whether it's a webinar or a virtual event or whatever, and gifting, modern gifting? What are you seeing there?
It's been really interesting. So, like, we touched on earlier with all of these big, in-person events getting canceled, right? Like Inbound got canceled and Dreamforce got canceled, all these, things that everybody looks forward to. We've really seen, just a huge rise in webinars. And that's a good thing on one hand, but also it's kind of a challenging thing because then there becomes a lot of saturation. We're already on Zoom all day having calls, and then to also attend multiple webinars per week, it can be a little bit challenging to, again, like rise above that
Hmm.
noise, stand
Yeah.
out to the, target audience. So we've seen gifting be used in tandem with either the webinar registration or sometimes as a follow up after the registration. So that's been really cool. So we've seen them do things like use charity gift cards where, once somebody registers, you can send them a charity gift card where maybe even they can pick from a variety of charities and maybe go with something local they want to support. Or we even have like COVID related charities that they can support, but also things like food delivery or coffee gift cards. That can be a really great incentive and pretty affordable for most businesses, to send a $5 coffee gift card or a $15 um, food delivery gift card, so that there's a little bit of incentive to
Hmm.
attend the webinar and then have coffee on that company or have lunch on that company. So that's been a really great pairing. But we've, seen this used for other types of events. I mean, even, like what we're doing now with the podcast, seen it used as like a nice gift for after the podcast, as a way to like show your appreciation for somebody taking out time from their day and chatting with you, and just to like further build that relationship, because really that's what
Hmm.
it's all about. And I'm sure you're going to have a need to network and work with that individual in the future. So that's always a nice way to kind of, keep a memory fresh with them, that you're really memorable.
Yeah. Well, and some of the gift examples you're sharing are really fresh, right? Food, things like that. So, yeah, totally relevant. What about, I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast recording, Nick, that this is a topic I've never covered before, but I'm going to bring up a topic I've covered many times on this podcast, and that is marketing and sales alignment. So, on that topic, how do you see gift marketing kind of playing into marketing and sales alignment? What are you seeing there?
I think that that's one of those things that, from all my history working in marketing, interfacing with different companies that we're working with, every organization's a little bit different with how their teams are structured, right? Like sometimes SDRs actually report into marketing, they work more closely, or if they don't, report into marketing, marketing often works really closely with, that SDR team to kind of help with some of those top of the funnel activities. So again, we've seen like gifting be used pretty effectively to help with the securing meetings with like maybe like a strategic account that hadn't responded to outreach in the past. It just really boosts the ability for marketers to get these leads engaged and help them drive more meetings that they could without just relying on the traditional email, text, phone calls, LinkedIn emails.
Hmm.
Speaking of LinkedIn, I've um, even this week I've seen it start to be used in a more fluid way with LinkedIn, things like DoorDash, Uber Eats, so they can, have dinner on them when they're, or excuse me, have dinner like maybe later that evening. So, it's one less thing they have to worry about. So they don't feel that bad if they take a meeting with that individual that day. But the really cool thing I've seen lately is I've even seen it used as part of conversation ads in LinkedIn, which are kind of a newer offering from them, where the ad actually only pops to somebody when they're active on LinkedIn. And then they just build a little sequence within that conversation ad to offer up the DoorDash or the Uber Eats and get that meeting secured. So I've seen that be a really cool and kind of time efficient and effective way to accomplish that. And but again, like you were saying, I think it's all about marketing, sales, really being best friends, coming together, and
Yeah,
making
no
sure that their
kidding.
goals are aligned. Because it's so surprising to still see marketing and sales butt heads and throw each other under the bus for, these leads aren't good enough and I don't get
Right.
enough leads and
Yeah,
all those typical things.
which has been around for decades, and I got the arrows in my back to prove it too.
I know, I got some of
So
those.
don't we all? I would think then that the integration into the marketing technology is a key factor in driving that interaction between sales and marketing on the types of gifts that are effective, the types of gifts that maybe sales wants to have versus what's available, and getting feedback and really measuring the effectiveness. Hey, the DoorDash thing generates more meetings than the charity gift card thing, which I'm totally making up on the fly, which is I'd probably want to see the reverse of that to be true. But you get my point, right? The metrics are going
Right.
to be there in the marketing technology so that marketers can see which gifts are actually producing, sales can see, and then they can act based on that data on, which gifts to use in which different use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And we even have a kind of a proprietary metric in our system called cost per touch, so that marketers can have some kind of apples to apples way of sorts to compare it to like their other, traditional digital metrics that they're very accustomed to, so that, over time they can really see, wow, this is a pretty, cost effective way. It's actually only, $5 per touch, or $6 per touch, which is pretty on par with a lot of like LinkedIn ad cost and
Right.
Google AdWord cost and other
Right.
things.
Cool. Cool. Well, Nick, I am going to transition now to our summary. And this is the part where, as you know, I do a quick summary on the things that we have discussed here today. And then I ask you to comment on my summary, add anything you'd like to add, fill in any holes, whichever the case may be. And then we'll ask you for your digital contact information. And then we'll bring this episode to a wrap. So we began our conversation with just an introduction to you. You're head of marketing at Postal.io. I love that name. You are an offline, not an offline, an online sales and marketing gifting platform where you help companies improve sales, customer retention. We heard lots of use cases in our discussion. I love the fact that you're integrated into marketing technology and sales technology like HubSpot, Outreach, SalesLoft, and Salesforce, which really enables marketers and salespeople to generate workflows and cadences and integrate it into the way that they're doing their selling activities. So it really brings gift marketing from what has been around for decades into the modern marketing world, which is why we set up this conversation, right? So love that. And so the premise for this whole discussion was the fact that everything's changed in 2020. A lot of events have been canceled, so marketers have been looking for other ways to do marketing and demand gen and that sort of thing. A lot of budgets have shifted, and they've shifted toward gifting. And a lot of companies that are doing virtual events and spending a lot of money are not necessarily seeing the ROI. So gifting is something that you're seeing budget being allocated for. We talked about how really this is kind of industry agnostic, and those are my words. I don't think you used exactly that description, but what I'm hearing you say is just about any industry can use gifting, and use the example that sharing knowledge by sending books can be done really in any industry. And you used a couple of examples how you and your company used the book called Giftology as an example, and you see marketing agencies use books like This is Marketing by Seth Godin. You see, Outreach using a book from them called Sales Engagement. So, depending on the industry, any company can be sending a gift, even though it may not be highly personalized in the example of a book. But then you gave examples of some personalization. You said that companies, particularly in the SaaS space, are pretty savvy. They create a lot of swag. They really do some research on an individual, a prospect. They find something that's useful or unique about them, and then they send them something that maybe pertains to their sports team, or you mentioned like a Yeti mug with their college on it, or even something related to their pets if they learn that about them on their social media. You also said that some industries are doing things that are unique to their industry, like finance and real estate people are sending gifts that are uniquely aligned with their service offerings. And then we also talked about how in digital events like webinars, a lot of companies are using digital gift cards to increase registrations and also increase engagement at the events. So things like sending a gift card after a registration, or to help drive the registration or help drive the attendance. You said that you're seeing a mix of charity cards and even COVID related charity events, and even things like, food delivery, coffee gift cards. But what I love about this whole discussion, Nick, is that it really can add another dimension of marketing and sales working together because of the integration in the marketing technology and the ability to really measure what's generating meetings, securing meetings and target accounts and that sort of thing. So the ability, and you said this really, I think it was the closing point before I segued to the marketing. You said the ability to measure the cost per touch, that metric, compared to other digital metrics, is something that marketers really, really appreciate and treasure. So, Nick, I'll leave my summary there. Is there anything that you would like to add or comment on?
No, that was a really great summary, Bernie. I mean, I think you touched on a lot of great points, and what you just recently said, right? Like, I think that's what we focus on. That it is adding that other dimension, right? We are a platform that you interact with online, but you interact with it to allow you to leverage the offline and have that be part of your in mails and text and emails and all your traditional digital ways. So yeah, I think that you really hit the nail on the head there. I agree. I think almost any industry could use it. I think it just takes a little bit of thoughtfulness and planning, maybe not something you want to rush into, but just be really mindful of how you're going to use it and put some concerted effort into figuring out what's going to be best for your unique business. But I think that gifting is here to stay, and it's definitely something I see marketers continuing to use into the future.
I love the innovation behind it. It's modernizing something that's been around for decades, right? Gifting's been around for decades. And it's just adding that modern element on all the things we discussed here today. So, Nick, where would you like to send my listener to online, digitally, to connect with you, learn more about what you've got going on at Postal?
Yeah, if you want to connect with Postal, we're at Postal Inc. Postalinc on Twitter. And if you're interested in connecting with me directly, I am at Nick Grant, NickGrant, the Nick Grant on LinkedIn. I was lucky enough to snag that name. So
Cool.
please reach out and connect with me there.
And the website is postal.io.
Correct. Postal.io.
Fantastic. Love it. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining me here on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thanks, Bernie.
Hey, don't forget to visit postal.io to learn how you can integrate direct mail and gifting into your existing strategy. Postal.io is a sales and marketing engagement platform that generates leads, increases sales, and improves customer retention.